The Apollo 11 lunar module landed on the lunar surface on July 20, 1969. Following a flawless landing, Neil Armstrong opened the module's door and descended to the moon's surface in his spacesuit. Neil Armstrong, in a historic moment, became the first human to walk on the moon, delivering the famous line,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
But did it actually happen? Even after more than 50 years, some people still don't believe humans landed on the moon. They come up with their own ideas, saying the Apollo 11 mission was just a fake setup by America. Some think they filmed everything on Earth and tricked everyone. They wonder how the flag could move without air. What's the real story? The Apollo 11 mission happened because of the Cold War. This war was between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both countries were in a space race, trying to outdo each other in space exploration. In 1957, the Soviet Union was the first to launch a satellite called Sputnik. It circled around the Earth in space. That's why the United States wanted to do something big, like landing on the moon. A few months later, in 1958, America launched its own satellite. However, in 1961, there was another shock for America. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to go to space, beating America again. Just a week later, President Kennedy wrote a letter to the Vice President. In the letter, he asked how they could surpass the Soviet Union in space exploration. By putting a laboratory in space, or by a trip around the moon. Are we working 24 hours a day on existing programs? If not, why not? Are we making the maximum effort? On May 25, 1961, in his renowned speech, President Kennedy made a promise to the world. He pledged to send humans to the moon before the end of the decade. Moreover, he assured that they would bring the humans back to Earth safely.
Before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
For many, this announcement seemed unbelievable. Over the next 5 years, he allocated $7 to $9 billion in additional funding to the space program to fulfill this goal. The entire space agency focused on achieving this aim. Just months later, the testing phase began. Between 1963 to 1967, many unmanned tests were carried out. In February 1967, they scheduled the first manned tests for the Apollo program. The initial mission, known as Apollo 1, aimed to send astronauts into space in rockets. However, tragedy struck during Earth-based tests on January 27, when a fire broke out in the cabin. The 3 astronauts who were preparing for the space mission lost their lives in the incident. After this painful event, NASA didn't lose courage. Instead, it continued further testing. Apollo 4, Apollo 5, and Apollo 6 were all unmanned missions. In October 1968, the Apollo 7 mission successfully sent humans into space. Just 2 months later, in December, the Apollo 8 mission took 3 astronauts near the moon. Another 3 months later, in March 1969, the Apollo 9 mission was launched to test the lunar module, the part of the spacecraft intended for landing on the moon. Following that, in May 1969, the Apollo 10 mission took place. During this mission, 3 astronauts practiced nearly everything that was planned for the Apollo 11 mission, except for the actual moon landing. Witness the rapid pace at which NASA launched missions one after another. Every 2 to 3 months, a new mission aimed to test the next aspect rockets, spacecraft, and lunar exploration. Following a series of meticulous tests, the culmination occurred on July 16, 1969, with the launch of the Apollo 11 mission.
2, 1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The Apollo 11 mission comprised 3 astronauts: Commander Neil Armstrong, who led the mission, Michael Collins, the command module pilot, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot. These three names are etched in the pages of history. While Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are widely known today, Michael Collins isn't as popular. The reason for this is quite interesting, and I'll share it with you later in this video. The spacecraft for the Apollo 11 mission had three primary components: the command module, the service module, and the lunar module. The first two parts, the command module and service module, are collectively known as CSM, which stands for Command and Service Module. The goal was to detach the lunar module, allowing it to land on the moon. For the return journey, the lunar module would be relaunched and reattached to the CSM, enabling the astronauts to return to Earth. The spacecraft was launched using a Saturn V rocket loaded with 1 million gallons of kerosene, liquid oxygen, and liquid hydrogen. The fully loaded rocket weighed nearly 3 million kilograms. With the assistance of the Saturn V, the spacecraft swiftly reached Earth's orbit in under 10 minutes. After completing approximately 1.5 orbits around Earth, Mission Control, situated on Earth, permitted to initiate translunar injection. These events unfolded within 5 hours of launch. However, reaching the moon itself took several days. 19th July, 1969. After traveling nearly 400,000 kilometers, the Apollo 11 spacecraft entered the moon's orbit. It then split into two parts: the command and service module with Michael Collins, and the lunar module with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Only the lunar module was meant to land on the moon, giving Armstrong and Aldrin the chance to step onto its surface. Michael Collins remained in the command module in lunar orbit. The moonwalk, witnessed by approximately 650 million people on television, featured Armstrong stepping onto the lunar surface first, followed by Buzz Aldrin. They conducted scientific experiments over the next 2.5 hours, collected samples, and set up instruments. The astronauts collected 23 kilograms of lunar rock and dust. As a symbolic gesture, they left behind an American flag on the lunar surface and a plate with the inscription, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon." Following this, the three astronauts oriented the spacecraft toward Earth for their return journey. Despite the mission's difficulties, the astronauts skillfully overcame obstacles and successfully returned to Earth. Apollo 11's moon landing was the top news in newspapers worldwide. Doubts arise about the authenticity of America's 1969 moon landing, suggesting a suspicion that it might have been a staged operation for Cold War advantage. This is just one example of the many conspiracy theories surrounding the moon landing. However, these theories have been debunked multiple times. The apparent fluttering of the flag planted on the moon during the Apollo 11 mission can be explained by its unique design. Unlike regular flags, the one taken to the moon had a horizontal rod at the top to ensure it remained extended and visible in the absence of wind on the moon. The theory questioning the absence of stars in the photos taken by Armstrong and Aldrin during the moon landing can be addressed straightforwardly. The moon landing occurred during the day, with sunlight illuminating the moon's surface. The astronauts' white spacesuits were highly reflective, and the cameras of that era lacked the resolution to capture stars beyond these reflections. But then, who took the photos of Neil Armstrong descending from the lunar module? Again, a simple answer: multiple cameras were installed on the lunar module. One thing can be said for sure: before the end of this decade, we will see humans back on the moon.